everybody, and welcome to On the Other Hand. I'm sure if you've seen our shows in the past, you know, you never know what to expect. And tonight's going to be no different, okay, except no politics tonight. This is going to be a learning experience for all of us, okay? We're going to have two wonderful guests. Kathryn du Pree, did I say that right?
You did.
Thank you very much. She's the executive director of Benhaven. And my other guest is Richard Joseph, and he gets a bigger title, lead behavioral with the individual and family support team. He made me say all that. I'm sorry, you know, what can I tell you? But anyway, I'm going to start out a little differently because let me explain a little bit about today's show. I need to start by complimenting two towns. Now you're going to say, Murty, you're on the shoreline. Why are you going to be complimenting two towns that aren't down here? Well, because they're models, they're role models for other towns too. And they're both start with C, Cromwell and Colchester. Well, why did I pick those two? It will also tie into when we talk to Benhaven, okay? And why I chose them is because both of them have a kindness campaign going on in their towns, okay? The first one is Cromwell, and you're gonna like this because kindness is contagious is the campaign which is being supported by the Cromwell community. Not just an organization, but the Cromwell community. If you go through Cromwell, you'll see signs on lawns that say, kindness is contagious. And at the bottom, Cromwell Children's Coalition in small letters, okay? And Colchester, I gotta give them credit, same kind of thing, okay? They call theirs, Colchester is Kind. Now in Cromwell, we deal mostly with children that need a helping hand. And Colchester could be a family, it could be adults, it could be anything that needs some support. So I have to commend both of those towns because kindness is what it's all about, okay? So this ties right into what my guests here are going to talk to you about tonight, and that's going to be supporting, and also this kind of made me grin when I saw this. Autism Speaks is an organization that is committed to making 2020 the year of kindness for people with autism, with the bold goal of achieving 1 million acts of kindness, both big and small. So, now you're probably asking yourself, what do I need to know about autism? Well, it's very important. I'm hoping that this show will tell you why you need to know about autism, how to support someone, a child or an adult with autism, and we're going to go right to the people that know how to tell you what it is. We're a community in this state, and we need to support one another. So we're going to start tonight with learning about autism, and I'm sure that's going to help you. It'll help your children. It'll help people who have autism realize that their community really cares. So I'm going to start with Kathryn, only because of my age. And when I grew up, it was always ladies first. So, and you're laughing because you heard it too.
I have.
And you're just a baby compared to me, so what can I tell you? Okay, so I'm going to ask Kathryn a couple of questions, but they're more about her right now. And so let's do the how, what, and why. So, and you're going to be next, so pay attention because you're going to do the how, what, and why. Okay. All right, Kathryn, how did you get involved? When did you get involved, and why? Why being the real kicker question.
So I actually, as many people in our field, got involved early in life, and I got involved mostly because of a family member. Although I also remember now that I lived in a neighborhood, and within 10 houses of me there were 2 children with autism. one male and one female, and autism is much more prevalent among males than it is among females. And neither of those individuals were able to go to our regular school, but went to special needs schools, and they were my peers and my age group. And I saw how other children really didn't accept them. And I probably thought about it more than maybe other children did because I had a nephew who had autism. And my nephew's not actually that much younger than I am. But he was diagnosed, I think, at the age of 3. And I actually spent much of my time when I was a teenager helping to do in-home programming for him. He had some very special programming that went on, and a lot of volunteers were needed by my sister to keep that programming going. And I was one of those people, and I spent my summers with him, sort of helping him do his educational programs that the family was responsible for in between his academic school year of September to June. So that was how I started.
You started, and in those days, we did not mainstream children, right?
No.
In those days, I remember that, back when dinosaurs walked the earth when I was young. You're not supposed to laugh at that. Yes, you are. You can laugh at that. But I remember children that I knew, okay, not going to school with me. You know, that just wasn't, just didn't happen. We had special schools that they went to.
Correct. That was very typical.
And that was your nephew.
Yes.
Okay.
So he also went to special school as a young student.
And so then, you had a member of the family that you know had this, and I don't want to say it's a problem. What is it? How do I handle that so that I don't insult anybody?
It is a disability, or it is a condition that someone has.
Condition that someone has. I like that. All right. So, but then, I mean, you grew up around it, but what made you decide to dedicate your career to this?
It troubled me that the people I knew who had autism, and maybe at that young age, I wasn't sure of the terminology.
Yes.
But that they did have trouble being accepted by other kids, and that they weren't, as you said, going to the public schools that the rest of us went to. So I really started my college career thinking I would be a special education teacher. And I changed as time went on, but that was my original thought.
You were just going to do special education, and then you changed.
And my nephew actually lived with me when I was only about 20 and he was 14 or 15. And one of the things I tried to do for him, because we lived in a different city at that point than either where his parents lived or I had grown up, was to help him get integrated and mainstreamed into the school system. And that did work for him, but that felt important to me at the time.
That's great. I think that's terrific. Okay, your turn. How, what, where, and why?
Well, I remember in high school we had the kids with special needs who did go to school downstairs in the basement, so we never really got to see them. And so I went to college, and I started off as a business major, and I hated business, so I said, maybe I'll do psychology. So I did some psychology with sociology, and right after college, a friend of a friend referred me I was looking for a job, so one of my friends said, oh, I know a place you can work. It was a special needs school in North Haven. And I got in there, and I fell in love just on the tour of the school. I realized this kid is great, these kids are great, because I got to connect with them, walk through the classroom. They wanted us to kind of come in and see how we would fit in that setting, and I really enjoyed it. So I was there for a couple of years, and I really, really liked it, but I wanted to make more money. So I left, and I got a job at DCF, and I went to work as a DCF case manager, and I hated it.
And you hated it.
And I called my boss at that school again, and I went right back there, and I worked, and I enjoyed it. And then I moved to a couple agencies around Connecticut, but then I found Benhaven. And I've been there for 13 years, and I really enjoy working there.
And it just clicked.
It just clicked.
It just clicked.
I did some other things. I worked at a psych hospital. I did other kinds of, I worked at a nursing home, but working with kids, especially kids with special needs, really touched my heart.
That touched your heart.
And it's something that when you're in the helping profession, you can't seem to leave. You know, you try to do different things, and then you end up right back where you were.
Right where you started from.
Absolutely, and I love it.
See, That is a gift. That is definitely a gift. And as I was saying, I was chairman of the Governor's Coalition on Youth with Disabilities, and there was a child in the school system in Cromwell, a lovely young lady, but she was a Downs child. And the other students, it wasn't that they were mean, don't misunderstand me, but they just didn't know how quite to deal with that. So she ended up sitting by herself in the cafeteria until one little person, I'm not going to say whether a male or female, decided to sit with her. And once that ice was broken, then other kids would sit with her. But it took a while to break that ice, and we don't want that happening to any child, regardless of their disability. So that's why we're here today. We're here to talk so that you understand a little more, even if you don't have it in your family or you don't have it as a neighbor, but your child, your brother, or your sister might deal with this. So let's move on. Talk to me about how you decide that a child has autism.
So we at Benhaven, we don't diagnose.
You don't diagnose?
We don't diagnose. Usually a doctor would diagnose this.
Okay.
So we get referred through the Department of Developmental Disabilities. So we get referred by them to Benhaven. They come to Benhaven. My boss goes out and assesses the child, not assess, but the situation to see if we can work with them or not. And then she chooses, because it's kind of like you go out and then you have to make a match. You have to match. So you have to match a staff person to work with them, who works directly with them, does community outings, does ADLs, which is activities of daily living, or cooking. It could include cooking, showering, whatever. And then you have a behaviorist, which is me, and I go in and I get some strategies together by interviewing the parents. It's about things that work or didn't work, and we come up with some strategies that will work with this child or adults. So we go from age 8 to about, the oldest person on my caseload I think is 38.
They're 8 to 38.
Well,
and you work with, I think that's great.
We have older people, I think, on our caseload, but right on mine, per se.
Okay, all right,
Yes.
8 to 38. Even just you that I'm sure is something that people don't recognize, that there's a support group from 8. I mean, when we talk now, I have to be honest with you and say, in my head, children.
Right.
But you're dealing with someone who's 38 how do you do that?
Well, that's tough, because when you have someone that old, older, some of them live in their own apartments. My job is to keep kids at home and adults at home rather than to send them to group homes. So these strategies are very important to keep them at home. So he's this one who's 38 lives on his own in his own apartment, and I've taught him some skills that instead of getting upset and hitting people, because he can get aggressive. He can send me an email or he can give me a call, and he does that. He called me recently to say that he almost pulled his mom's hair, but he said, I stopped myself, and I said, that was great, I'm so proud of you. And they're looking for that praise. He was looking for that praise, and I said, I'm so proud of you for not doing that. And so he went on through his days.
So he had a relief valve in you, somebody that he could turn to, and that he could, and rather than just reacting. Wow, I think that's terrific. I think that's just great. Oh, wow. Now, your turn.
Well, so Richard's talking about one of our programs, which is our Individual and Family Support Service. And as he said, his job and that of Benhaven is to keep people in their homes and also help them learn how to live in their communities and be accepted by other people. But we offer many programs, and we serve people up into their 60s.
Wow.
So Benhaven has been in existence for 50 years. And it was started by Amy Leddick for her son, because schools were not accepting people with autism. And her son is the Ben of Benhaven, and he still lives with us.
I see. That's where I was going to ask you where the name came from, because
That's
Benhaven,
it.
and it's not Ben and then a big haven, it's Benhaven.
That's right.
And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And you've been in existence for 50 years?
Yes. So we started out with a school. We now have 2 schools, which we can talk about later. And then because Ben finally needed to leave home,
Right.
Amy Leddick also started a residential program. So we have 8 group homes that serve between 2 and 6 people each. And Ben lives with a group of people he's lived with for 25 years.
Wow,
Right.
that is amazing. It really is. That's some of the things that I'm glad people are learning, because we in our minds, if we don't deal with anyone with autism or any disability, we have no clue.
Right.
So you teach them life skills.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. And
you try, your first question was about how do people get diagnosed, and Richard was correct. We don't diagnose, and that's usually a medical diagnosis, or sometimes it's an educational diagnosis. But parents who have a young child with what they think might be autism should really know that there's an early intervention program for infants to 3 years of age. And there are many providers in the state, we're not one of them, who serves a child that young and provides them with in-home clinicians, people like Richard, physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, to really get them the right start in life.
okay.
And
now,
then we have programs that pick up when they're over 3.
when they're over 3.
Yeah.
All right. As you said, they're diagnosed by a doctor or some
Clinical
physician,
psychologist
right? Yeah,
or a
something
physician,
like that.
yes.
What would manifest itself in a child that a mother would say, I think there's something wrong here, but maybe I'm jumping to conclusions. What
So that's a very good question. And as you probably know, Murdy, we keep nationally saying there's more prevalence of autism sort of every year. So it used to be 1 in 150, and now it's 1 in 68 young children are diagnosed with autism. And it's much more prevalent among boys than it is among girls. But I think that what you see early in life is a lack of socialization, a lack of connection even to family members with a very young child, delays in speech ability. You see some very repetitive, or we call perseveration type of behaviors, where somebody might do the exact same thing all the time. That might be a physical behavior such as spinning. It may be interested in light or colored paper, but it might be something that a young child obsesses about and really can't be disconnected from really wanting to focus their time on. So if you see any of those sort of lack of development that you might expect in your own child, a lot around interaction, a lot around speech, then you probably want to be talking to your doctor and get a diagnosis.
That's very, very good advice, because I'm going to be honest with you, no parent wants to think that their child has a disability.
Correct.
I mean, that's just common nature. That's just our nature, that there's nothing wrong with our child.
Correct.
But obviously, from what you're telling me, if the child is diagnosed and if the child is helped along, they can be really good, productive citizens, just learning how to behave, to pick up the phone and call their friend or text somebody.
Absolutely.
Or instead of reacting and just pulling his mother's hair or her mother's hair. And I think that's really, really, we've come so much further than we had years and years ago.
Right.
And as you say, 1 in 68 now, these children are born with autism.
Correct.
Talk to me about, I've read a little bit, and I'm no expert on anything, believe me, but isn't there a spectrum of different kinds of, am I wrong? Or I mean, I'm a person reading it that has no background in this at all, and I'm going, oh, am I saying this right, or what am I not saying,
Right. So all of these diagnoses are psychiatric terms, and they're in a big journal that's sort of a medical guide for how you diagnose and define certain disabilities. And you are absolutely correct. In the most recent iteration of that journal, or medical guidance, it's now referred to as the autism spectrum disorder.
Good, so
And
I
that
did
really
read something right.
encompasses everybody. That's right. So you may have people, so that's a wide range of people's intellectual ability. So you may have people on that autism spectrum disorder who also have an intellectual disability. So they have a lower IQ, less cognitive ability. But you can have people on that spectrum who have a higher IQ than I do, but have the autism piece that really holds them back.
That blew my mind when I read that yesterday. Okay, I like trying to do my homework, right? And it said that some of them are, what did they say? That some of these children are just practically brilliant.
Brilliant.
Yeah, they said, you know, and I'm saying, okay, how does a child that is brilliant, so, you know,
Right.
okay, how do they deal with the fact that I'm so bright in this particular way, but don't touch me? How do they deal with that themselves?
Well, we know it's a social deficit, so they can be smart, but socially they don't know really how to interact with others. And we know a lot of people with autism have sensitivity to touch,
Yes.
sound, different things. So it's getting to know the person. So you can't tell right off the bat, oh, this person might be sensitive. And you can't generalize these things either,
That's
because
what I was
one may be sensitive to touch, one may be, you know,
Yeah.
the individual. It all depends on the individual.
Okay, well, knowing that you two were coming today, see, I tried to do my homework, and
Sounds
it
like you did a good
said,
job.
and I found out how dumb I was, and it said, because I'm sitting there reading and I'm going, oh, I didn't know any of this stuff, I didn't know any of this. It said that no two people are alike. Is that true? I mean, I like your eyebrows going up like that. Go ahead.
Well,
Is it when they have autism that they're not? I mean, you can't cookie cutter
Of course not.
kids.
And that's the thing. Like everyone, they're human beings too.
Yes.
We're all human,
Yes.
and so you can't generalize them. So we use something called person first language, because we see the person as a person first, an individual, before their disability. So we always say, oh, so his name is John and he has a disability, he has autism. So you don't say John is autistic, John has autism. So we try to
do that again. You say John
is a young man who has autism. So it's the person first before you recognize the person first before you recognize their disability. So
You're
it's
not
called,
just seeing him as
not as an autistic man.
Yes, you know what? They didn't say that in this thing. The 4 or 5 pages, and it never said that, and I like that. Okay, so
And you're right. Nobody's the same, and they're human beings too, just like we are. And so strategies that work for one person may not work for another.
for somebody else.
Exactly.
The saying is, you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism.
Yeah.
You know, you don't really know
yeah.
everything about the next person you're going to
Exactly,
meet.
absolutely.
And there's that broad spectrum, like you just said. There's a broad spectrum.
And
Okay.
I think when Richard said we deal with person-first language,
I
we
like
also
that.
deal with individual services and supports for people for that very same reason.
So
We
each-
couldn't come up with a cookie cutter program either,
Okay.
just like you can't have a cookie cutter version of who the person is.
Okay, so that's good. So this young Murdy, they bring Murdy to you, and they say, Murdy, we think she's a little, you know, she's not very social, okay?
Mm-hmm.
My problem is I never shut up, but so you know that, right? But anyway, so what would you do? You'd sit down and talk to this person and pick out what you think would be the best for he or she, and looking at each one of them individually?
Yes, we do. So, you know, we try to collaborate with schools because they learn a lot of different things in schools, and
Right.
so we try to generalize some of whatever they learn at home in the community. So, you know, going to school meetings and meeting as a team.
That's what I want
We
to do.
work with DDS, and so we also meet with them. So it's all team based. So we have family members involved, siblings, schools, friends, family, you know, even us, you know, and staff.
Do you, I'm going to put both of you on the spot, do you do outreach to schools if you don't have a child there? Let's say we don't have one in Cromwell, a child with this type of disability. do you do outreach to say, we'll go to a teacher meeting on Friday afternoon and we'll come and talk to the teachers about autism so that they will not only recognize it, but would know how to deal with the parents and know how to deal with the child?
We do.
Do you?
Yes. So we also have an affiliation with Yale, and we've always been very fortunate to work with the Yale Child Study Center, and a lot of their work focuses on autism, and they do a lot of diagnostic work of children. And we are brought into classes at Yale for people taking an autism course, and those people volunteer with our residents and our 2 schools. And then we have what's called a behavioral learning network. So that is comprised of people who have both their special education degree and also are a BCBA, which is a board certified behavioral analyst.
Oh, wow.
And that's now a technique and a clinical ability that's expected in schools to work with people with autism who are integrated into the normal classrooms. Many schools hire their own BCBAs, behavior analysts, but we have a team of those people. So we go in and work with children in schools and work to educate teachers and paraprofessionals on how to better work with that child and have them be mainstream, to use your term from before.
I think that's so great because if people don't know how to deal with this, even a teacher, it's got to be very frustrating if you have a child in your class
and you don't know
and you don't know how really to deal with this, and neither do the children around this child.
Correct.
So there's a frustration there, I imagine, on 3 counts: the child, the children that are in the class, and then the teacher. And then, you know, and if the teacher does the wrong thing, I'm sure that the child becomes disruptive. And when that child becomes disruptive, then these children get disruptive. And so you've got this balance. So I'm glad to hear you go in, you work with the teachers, because as I told you, not knowing myself how to deal with someone with autism, this is very enlightening, because you might have a family move in next door to you.
Correct.
And all of a sudden, one of the children is acting differently than your child and some other child up the street. You don't want to see the one that just moved in totally ostracized because the families don't know how to deal with that.
That's right.
You know?
We also provide educational consultation to the Hospital for Special Care. I think we talked about that a little bit earlier. That facility has a unit that does diagnostic work and some inpatient evaluation and clinical treatment for people with autism. And we provide their educational program while they're there. And then we can do sort of a transition out back to their typical school.
That's really good. Okay, from what I read, okay, and this is something you 2 just kind of agreed with me. Autism is impaired communication and social interaction. Am I correct? Is that really what? Read that out of the internet. Look how smart I am.
How could it be wrong?
How could it be wrong? You know? Well, okay. And it said the same thing we said earlier, that some people with autism are gifted and others need significant levels of support. That's where you come in.
Yes.
You meet the child or the adult or whatever it is, and then you decide what level of support. Now, if I move into an apartment by myself and I have autism, okay, how do you know that I eat right, that I, take a shower when I should? Do you follow up with those things?
So before that decision is made for them to live on their own, we kind of have to assess, the team has to assess the whole situation.
What's the team?
So the team, like I said, would be parents, family members, DDS.
Do you know what DDS is?
That's the
Department of Developmental Services.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
Just in case your audience doesn't know that.
That's good. Department of Developmental Services.
Yes.
I have a little trouble saying that. I think we'll
That's why Richard says DDS.
Yeah, that's right. We'll stick with the DDS.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
And so we get together as a team to agree on this person living on their own. So I recently have 2 guys on the spectrum who live together as roommates, and they don't have an intellectual disability. They just have autism, and they're on the spectrum, and their IQs are pretty high. But they live like bachelors, and so we go in. We have staff support there all the time, and we go in there. We're like, okay, it's time to clean your room, or your kitchen's filthy. Let's wash dishes.
Do something.
Exactly,
right.
because one of them really enjoys playing video games, and he's up all night. And then when we get there in the morning, I'm like, you need to wake up. You have to.
Yeah, right.
It's time to clean your house, or
So you sure that's not just a teenager?
So we try to stay on top of things with them when once the assessment.
So you follow up.
We do. We work with them. So they have the services, and they get a certain amount of hours through the Department of Developmental Services. And so we tend to, if they have 15 hours a week of direct care and they have an hour a week of my services, I go in and I assess different things and come up with strategies that can help them, even if it's a schedule, so someone can get up on Monday morning to do his laundry, and Tuesday he'll sweep the kitchen floor, something like that. So that's what.
So Richard has staff who work for him, who are in the home working on this skill building for people, but he oversees those people's work.
Okay. Now, parents. Okay, you have two young gentlemen that move into their own place. Are the parents still there to be supportive? Or are these two, or not, let's not use those two.
Okay.
Let's just say, on the whole, do parents, as the children get older, are they still as supportive as that cute little kid that's only 3? Or do they find it hard to be supportive?
I think that varies.
It does vary.
Does it?
We have some families that are very involved. Some take a step back once we're involved. With the services that we do provide through the Department of Developmental Services, the parents are supposed to be 50% engaged in the services.
That's what I wondered.
So,
that they,
If the child still lives in their home.
If they live at home.
Right.
If the child is out of the home or young adult, there is not, you don't get a lot of involvement. But if we need the parents, we call them. And the children always still call their parents.
And that's good.
Yeah, parents come to visit.
That's really, really good.
I think it's important probably for your audience to know is that we've talked about the fact that autism is across a spectrum.
Right.
Some people have an intellectual disability with that autism. Others are very bright, as we talk about. The Department of Developmental Services funds many people for in-home support services, but you only are eligible if you also have an intellectual disability.
Oh.
So their primary population is people with intellectual disabilities, and that would include our folks on the autism spectrum who have that. If you do not have an intellectual disability and you're an adult, you have very little opportunity for any state funding. So there's a very small autism waiver in this state where there's Medicaid funding for adults that's limited to 150 people statewide.
What happens if, as using your example, okay, I fall into that. I'm intelligent, but I still have that disability.
Correct.
How do is there anybody that helps them get jobs? Is there anybody that, what happens to these
That is the
people?
problem. So we have one of our school programs. We have 2 schools. One is a school for children who can't be in their public schools who have intellectual disability. The other is really mostly for children that you're talking about as an example. Highly intelligent, have autism, usually come to us in high school.
Right.
In many ways because of that social isolation or ostracism that happens to them in a high school. We have very intense services for them. We often have some of them who are 18 to 21 attend a college courses, and we support them going there. We get them volunteer work. We sometimes get them jobs. But once they become 21 and their school system no longer helps support them with those resources, they have very little available to them. So we have some who stay with us and their parents privately pay. So some parents say, oh, if Kathryn were my daughter and she's typical, I save for her what I can to go to college, If Richard's not typical, I'm going to put some of that resource towards giving him a head start in his adult life. But not all families can do that.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah.
Right, so that's a limited number of people. The Department of Rehab Services, DOORS, which is now, I believe, called Aging and Disability Services, does do some vocational and employment support for people. But that's rather time limited, and it's a rather narrow group of people who qualify. So we're very worried, and we advocate for this group all the time.
I'm worried just sitting here.
Right, because
I
then
don't
it
want
falls
these-
to a family to have to keep providing
or if it's the
support.
child does not, or the adult does not have that support, where do they end up? On the street? Or, I mean, is this something we're going to have to deal with if we don't deal with it now?
I think so. Or you have people who either their family continues to support them, have them live at home, or they may be in the kind of apartments Richard talks about, but nobody's going in to say, you haven't cleaned your bathroom in 3 weeks and you have no food in your refrigerator and you're not getting up in the morning to go to work because they're not eligible for that money. So those adults may be living a very isolated life.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
And yet very bright people who
see,
could contribute greatly to
yes,
society, right,
yes.
with just a little help and a push.
That's one of the reasons I'm glad you're here today, because that is something I would not have known.
Right.
And I cannot see why this state, or this country, to be
Correct.
honest with you, doesn't recognize that we just can't let these intelligent people go so far and then kick them to the curb because they're not slow.
Correct.
They're smart enough, but they just are lacking that one thing that makes them get up and clean their room and get on the bus and go to work and
right.
all that.
Yeah.
Oh, that is really, truly frightening, to be honest with you. And it's got to be frightening for parents who are getting older
I think it
and
is.
say to themselves, what's going to happen to Johnny or Mary or Susie
Correct.
when I'm gone?
Right.
Because I buy groceries and bring it to their house.
That's right.
And when I'm gone, who's going to do that?
Yes.
Well, how do we change that?
I think that takes some legislative attention and understanding of the issue because, you know, I'm not sure how much of an awareness, as you say, there is about it. So people see the Department of Developmental Services, and while it may have a waiting list, people are served, and people graduate high school, and they almost automatically have funding for at least their adult day program,
Right.
if not all their in-home services. So something continues for them that doesn't drop them off the educational cliff or really waste all that money and resource that was put into educating them for 21 years. So I think people are unaware that there's another group of people out there
You're absolutely right.
with
They
a
are
disability
not
that's not met as an
aware.
adult.
They are not aware of that.
Right.
And I can speak from experience, all right? I was a state ward till I was 18. I think a lot of my viewers have heard this story. But on June 22nd, I was going to be 18. And on the 18th of June, I was going to graduate from high school. So my present for my birthday was a letter from the state of Connecticut saying, as of the 22nd of June, we will no longer be responsible for you. Please make sure you have a job. And I can't remember the wording because I was 18, but I got this letter from the state of Connecticut which said, we're done. You're 18, you're done, okay? So I know what panic I went through.
Right.
Okay.
So you have a lot of understanding.
So I have total understanding of a young lady, a young man suddenly realize that they don't have that support anymore
Right.
that helped them get to this particular stage.
Correct.
So you're right. The legislature needs to deal with this. They need, even if it's just helping them find a job and then having somebody there to say, Mary, get up and go to work, or somebody
Yes.
calling them, or some mechanism of supporting them.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we run a very small program called Career and Transition Services, and it is for that age group. And it serves some people who are eligible because of their intellectual disability as well as autism. It serves more people who just have autism. And we are working with the new version of DOORS, Aging and Disability Services, and working with families to see how we can continue some support for those people. Even if it's a few hours a week, that may make an incredible difference.
Absolutely.
In these people's lives.
Absolutely, a total different in their lives,
Right.
you know? So, okay, I'm having a tough night, and and my roommate's getting on my nerves, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not available, who can that person turn to? Is there a 24-hour hotline? Like now they have, if you're thinking about committing suicide, you can dial certain numbers, and they'll help you. Somebody will talk to you. What happens to your friend that has this problem and wants to get to you or get to somebody?
Unfortunately, there's nothing they can do. There is no hotline.
There is no hotline.
There is no hotline that anyone can call. I mean, if the person gets disruptive, someone may call the police, which is sad because that's what happens to a lot of individuals with autism, that they're misunderstood. They're having a behavioral episode.
Meltdown right there.
Yep,
Yes.
and someone will call 911. So, you know, it's tough. You can't really tell them, well, so that's why I try to make myself available, or a family member. So there's someone on call, usually a family member. The guys who live at home tend to not have too many behavioral incidents.
Right,
So because that's why they can actually live at home. But some of them do. And I hear from them the next morning, usually, knock on wood, it's been okay. I haven't had any major issues.
Yeah, the only reason I'm asking that question, it wasn't that I expected you to be on call 24 hours a day. No, but you know what I mean? I'm looking for the person that doesn't have.
Or Richard.
Or Richard.
So the Department of Developmental Services, for the people who are its clients, has developed crisis intervention services over the last couple of years. And they've partnered with both the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services for adults, their crisis 24-hour support, their mobile support team, and with the Department of Children and Families mobile support teams. So they are now teams who are trained to also deal with the crisis needs of people with intellectual disability and hopefully autism. Okay. And they can respond. And then the Department of Developmental Services has in-home support staff like Richard, who aren't assigned regular people to work with, who if there's a crisis for a family or an individual living on their own, they can send those people out.
Oh, good.
So you can call 211. That's the emergency. So,
211.
but you wouldn't expect one of my guys to actually call 211. However, someone can.
Someone
so they would
can
send
for
someone.
Or a family might, right, Richard, if they lived with their family.
Right.
Because I recently asked a family member to call because one of their son wasn't refusing to go to school, and we were trying to figure out what was going on. So they called 211 and they sent out someone to talk to him. And he's nonverbal, so he used his communication device and he kind of told him what was going on.
Told them what was going on.
Absolutely.
Oh, good.
And most of our staff time with people is really evenings and weekends.
Yes.
So we are not a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, don't talk to me if it's another time. But Richard will have people out there at those times. You may be visiting a family on a weekend, or an individual lives alone. So while we're not a 24/7 response team, we're weekends and evenings. So people do have that lifeline.
Yeah, because, you know, bringing all of this up, and I'm saying to myself, we have a group of people out there, not just children, but adults, that don't have, or they have to know about a Benhaven, or what happens to them. I mean, if they're off in some corner of the state and they know nothing about Benhaven, or who's going to be taking care of them, or who do I go to?
Right.
Okay. That, to me, that is kind of frightening. I would hate to think that anybody in this state of Connecticut would not have somebody to go to. That's why I thought this kindness thing that the autism, you know, we were talking about.
Autism Speaks?
Yes, Autism Speaks. Tell me, what is Autism Speaks?
So Autism Speaks is a national advocacy group.
Okay.
And they certainly do have people in Connecticut who are part of their association. So they do a lot of fundraising, they do a lot of education, they do a lot of legislative advocacy, particularly at the federal level. We also in Connecticut have a group called the ASRC, which is Autism Services and Resource Center, based out of Wallingford, but is a statewide advocacy group. So that's a great connection for families in Connecticut, because they are more locally connected and their network is with our local legislators and the state agencies. So they're a great resource for people.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. My brain was getting ahead of me here. But how do we wake up the legislators up in Hartford to say to them, I know, I'm putting you right on the spot here, sit right on that spot. No, but I'm putting you on the spot because this to me is something I knew nothing about, and I'm learning today. How do we get their attention?
I'll pass this one to Kathryn.
Oh,
she actually,
brother.
she has done some of the work out there in Hartford, so she can.
Do you have a lobbyist?
We don't actually have a lobbyist. We have a very active, community-connected board who are generous with their time and help us to some extent. But Benhaven has not employed a lobbyist.
Yeah.
The only reason I'm asking is sometimes it's the squeaky wheel that gets the attention.
Very true.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, but you know, I mean, if you're the person that's jumping up and down in front of a legislator saying, I don't want anybody to eat eggs anymore. I made that up. Don't do that. That's a joke. That's a joke. You know, they're jumping up and down, and you know, the chicken farmer is over here saying everybody should eat eggs, you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
How do we get their attention so that they recognize that there's a group of people out there that really need a little more attention, especially if you're a quiet group and you're not out there screaming and jumping up and down and saying, we need help?
It's probably most effective. And it's hard to ask families to take on one more responsibility or demand because they're very involved and engaged with just everyday living and taking care of their children. But I think the most effective voice with legislators is not us as providers who are funded to provide services and may be seen as having, you know, our own interests in terms of what we promote. But if families and some of the individuals who we serve or other providers serve are very well spoken themselves, can tell their personal stories, because I think legislators are very sympathetic when they understand there's a real issue for their constituency.
I like that.
But maybe we as providers need to do more to encourage that.
More to encourage them. As I said, it's the squeaky wheel that gets the attention.
You're right, it
and
is.
if we're not out there squeaking, you know,
nobody knows.
Nobody.
As you say, you
so
did
much
know
today.
the issue. Right.
I learned so much today. I realized that, you know, this has got to be a team. It's got to be, you know, the parents.
Yes.
People in your vocation, you know. Professional vocation. And people like me who aren't touched by it, but need to know about it.
Right, and
care about it. And the teachers and the neighbors and the people that have children that are going to school with a child that's challenged.
Right.
People need to just know these things a lot more than they do. Right. It's easy to be blind and just say, I don't have anybody in my family, so I don't have to worry about it. But you do. We all have to worry about everything that way.
You're right.
Got to take care of our people, that's for sure.
And the other thing that I think families should know while their children are still under 21 is that there are more in-home resources for them than they may be aware of. So while DDS funds many of our services, they obviously get a certain amount of money and have to decide who are the highest priority people in need to dispense that money to. But more and more, both private insurance and Medicaid insurance is paying for in-home clinical behavioral services for children with autism.
Oh, good.
And if you're covered by a private insurer, that is just one of the services you're eligible for. If you're covered by Medicaid Husky, it's part of our state plan service. So there's no waiting list for that. There's no eligibility. If your insurance covers it, you can access it.
But only to a certain age.
Only till 21.
Only till 21, and then
again,
it's catch as catch can for somebody.
But the more that I think is done for people's children at a young age, the more they're going to be independent and ready for adulthood. Not that they won't still need some degree of support,
Exactly.
but those are the years to take advantage of the resources that are there.
Right.
And those resources through your insurance is for you whether your child has an intellectual disability or not, but has autism.
Sure.
So I just would encourage families who are listening to this, if they haven't thought to check that, they really should check if that's part of their plan.
That's helpful, right?
Early
there.
intervention is absolutely key.
Right.
Do it again. Early
Intervention is key.
So rather than just saying, Jimmy's going to outgrow it, we need to take, and people do that, you know. I know he's a little nervous right now, but I'm sure he's going to outgrow it. Whereas if you go with Jimmy right now, you'll be better off, right?
Correct.
Okay, all right. I think what we're going to do is, because Max, my friend, is telling me we got 5 minutes, so I want to make sure everybody knows Max is helping me out here. What I want to do is give you an opportunity to kind of close it up. If you had one word of advice or one little bit of advice, what would you tell people? You're next, so be thinking.
Well, for families of people with autism, I would say, you know, have courage and strength, advocate for what you need, work with your school systems, and take advantage of the other resources that are there, because the sooner your child receives services, the better they're going to be. And for the rest of us, I think that we have to understand that people do really want to be included and part of community life. And we have to accept a little bit more diversity and have patience with individuals and see their value to us and to their communities, to their schools, their churches, their civic groups, and accept what people may have to offer and see them as individuals.
I like that. Okay, you?
I say for communities that you know, you see someone with autism or someone who looks different, don't be afraid. You know, they want to be accepted. They want you to say hello to them too. So it's important to just be kind and say something nice to them.
Be kind. Oh, you are good. Oh, I love that. You just fed right into that, didn't you? Okay, we're getting to the end of our program. And as I do each time, I always close by thanking people. And I want to thank my two lovely guests tonight. And I want to thank the crew and everybody that's down here with the Valley Shoreline. Did I do that right? Because my brain is a little scrambled right now. Anyway, the Shoreline, they're just terrific. And they're wonderful people to work with. And I want to also thank our military, men and women, our veterans, our first responders, our educators, okay? Firefighters, you name it, they're all wonderful, wonderful people. Those are the people that keep our community so, so great. And so please, anything you learned today, share it. Share it with other people, share it with teachers. And I'm going to close by saying, God bless all of you and God bless America. Thank you very much.